Welcome, Henk Doornbos from Contracts 11. Tell me, what is Contracts 11 about?
Contracts 11 is a company which builds contracts-based software. And what we think, some software is so important that you really need to know what it does as a user. So you can rely on it. If I do this, then I can expect this. And also if something goes wrong, that you know what will happen then. And if you think about that, that's just what a contract is. Contracts tells me there are two parties or more parties, but one party has to do this, then the other one has to do that, and there are also clauses in the contract what should be done if something goes wrong. Some software systems are so important, for instance, if money is involved or safety is involved, that you need some form of contract-based stuff to express what it does. And we at Contracts 11 are working on a method and on tools to express those contracts, and from those contracts construct the working systems.
So if I understand you right, then you think a smart contract is way more than just an if this then that.
Well, that is
description.
Yeah, but this is not also it's not just about smart contracts, because software contracting is actually a quite ancient thing. It's around at least from the 70s. And smart contracts are rather new. But yeah, indeed, a contract is not just if this then that, but it is this. Two parties, one party has to do this, and the other has to provide an answer that should adhere to certain rules. And it should also really, because there are two things that are very important. The first thing is that the contract, you should be able to enforce it, otherwise it has no value. And if something is wrong, one of the parties thinks this is not okay, the other one did something wrong, then there should be some procedure to complain and to fix it.
And should this be in the contract, or should there be an outside party where you can go to for arbitration? It
should of course be in the contract what to do, but usually, just as a normal contract usually has as a final clause something, if everything fails, then you can go to that particular court, and then the judge will tell what to do.
So how would a smart contract go about telling me that my fridge doesn't want to do what I want? How do I know to take it to court or not?
Well, of course, you need in the contract you can say what should happen. For instance, you can have escrow things, that some money is in another contract, and if something goes wrong and some conditions are met, that part of the money can go back to one of the parties, or you can do something like you go to court or to things like geschillenkommissie.
Yeah, arbitration.
Arbitration, yeah.
Okay.
So, but the contracts, of course, because that's what the parties agree, should contain that clause, what to do then.
All right. And this is what Contracts 11 tries to develop?
This is what Contracts 11 develops, yeah.
All right. You've been a developer for quite a while, I think.
Quite a while, yeah. Yeah. At least from 1986 or something.
What piqued your interest when Bitcoin and other blockchain solutions came around?
Of course, there are a lot of things interesting things. The complexity of the thing, it's very interesting, and it's difficult. So it's a challenge to understand. That's one thing. Another thing was, and certainly when Ethereum came up, that you could use that to as a new means of implementing systems. So that was another thing that was very interesting for us, because there was, of course, you could do things like contracts already, but this gives us an extra opportunity to create them.
What would your advice be to some new person interested in blockchain technology? Where should they start if they wanted to start programming, for instance?
Well, I think because we programmers are in a very important position, because we are between the complication of the hardware and we have to build it for people who have to use the systems we create. What we do is we close the gap between what people want and what the hardware can do. So of course, usually what we do is programmers should know everything from the hardware. So you should read whatever you can from on blockchains and on Ethereum, and you should try the Microsoft blockchain Azure thing. Of course, but people do that already. So that's but that doesn't really help us to close the gap that we see. We see a big gap between what people need and what people want, and what businesses, the opportunities they see, and how to connect that to the Bitcoin solutions. You can see that here in various talks. It is hard for business people to understand. If you talk about connectivity and scalability, that's just not what someone with a business problem sees. So what we need to do is to close that gap, and I think programmers should be involved in closing that gap, because if you want to close the gap, you need to know both ends. There are a lot of people who are on the business side, but do not know enough from of the details of the difficulties of the implementation. And on the other hand, there are a lot of people who know exactly all details of the implementation, but know nothing how it could be used. So we need people who, if this has to be a success, and then we need to have people who can close that gap.
So what does a programmer need to do to close the gap?
A programmer needs really to talk to people. What are your problems? And then he should look, because everybody already did that. What kind of tools do I have to build this? And I think, of course, we can advise people to look into blockchains and to go deep into the details. They usually do that because that's interesting in a good way. But if they really want to help, they need to know how can I help real people with this knowledge? And because that's really at the moment for quite a few years already a problem. What I see. And that's also one of the reasons I think that real solutions have not yet occurred.
So this is what there is to be done to get a better connection with the actual users.
So I understand what the real not what you as a programmer think what a company should do. Of course you can do that, but try to find out, because that's what we really always have to do. How can we really help people to improve their way of working, improve the quality of life, because that's what it's all about. And then we can do that by, of course, our deep knowledge of technology. But usually that's not our problem, because that's already, we know that. On the other hand, on the other side, of course, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of blockchain evangelists who are doing that. A lot of them do not know enough from the technical details to really help there. Of course, I think there are exceptions. You can do both. You do a good job yourself, but I think I always think it must be easier for software engineers, for programmers, to because they are humans, also to think like business people. Then for business people it's much more difficult to know all the details and the difficulties of the machines and the programming languages and the sharding problems and the security problems. But it's easier for programmers to shift to the other side and to help closing that gap, because that gap has to be closed.
Thank you.